Hi everyone. So this is coming a little late, but I wanted to do a best books of 2023 video. So 2023 was a really good reading year for me. I didn't read a lot. I think I read like 37 books altogether, which is a book every other week at least. So I'm happy enough with that actually. I don't really care about the number though, and I don't think anyone should really, about how much you read in a year. Obviously I'm doing booktube, so I want to read as much as possible so I can review as much as possible. But for me, as a person who works full time and doing this kind of on the side, I'm very happy with 37. I had like a really good reading year. So many of those books were like 4 or 5 stars, and I'm really happy about that. Like I had a lot of really good reading experiences. But for this video, I just wanted to talk about kind of the top of the top. So these are basically all my 5-star reads of 2023. I have like 7 books and series to talk about, which were all like 5 stars for me, and I loved them. I'm just looking at them and like none of these were released in 2023. These were all actually books that were just new to me in the year, that I read in the year. So these are more just like general recommendations rather than good books from 2023. Just I happened to read them in 2023. What's fun is these are all quite different as well, so I'm happy. I started off the year really strong with A Darker Shade of Magic. I think I read this in January of 2023, and then throughout the year I read the second book, A Gathering of Shadows, and then the third book, A Conjuring of Light. So I read the entire trilogy and I loved the entire trilogy, but I'll just hold this one up while I'm talking about it. So these are all by V. Schwab. This is a self-contained trilogy, but she just came out with Fragile Threads of Power, which is a new series within this universe, and I've yet to get to it. I did buy it, but I need to read it. For me, I feel like 5-star books are like an experience for me. Like the reading experience was so enjoyable that I gave it 5 stars, and that's what I felt with this series. I really loved it. In this book you have Kel, that's in there, jumping between parallel worlds. So in this world you have 4 parallel Londons. I think it's black, white, red and grey, and all of them have like varying degrees of magic and how magic is used. Grey London is actually our London, so no magic at all. You have Red London, which is where Kel is from, where magic is used kind of in an elemental kind of way. Then you have White London, which kind of views magic as power, so the more magic you have, the more power you have. And then you have Black London as well. In the first book you don't know much about Black London. You do learn as the series goes. Kel is Nastari, I think that's how you pronounce it. So he's kind of this special type of magician who can use all elements of magic, and he has the ability to kind of travel between all the different parallel worlds. He has no family. As a boy he was taken in by the royal family in Red London, and they more or less raised him like a son, but still kind of like a servant as well. He has kind of a complex relationship with the king and queen, but he does have a very brotherly relationship with the Prince of Red London. And Kel kind of has the job of being a messenger, so he brings messages from each of the different monarchs in each London. There's another Antari from White London whose storyline I really enjoyed as well. It's quite dangerous for him to go to White London, and then in Grey London he's kind of this mysterious man that the king is really fascinated by. So Kel's a very interesting main character. I really did enjoy him. On the side he's a smuggler, so he smuggles some artifacts from, let's say, White London into Red London and like sells it, and that's how the plot kind of starts in this, that he smuggles something that he shouldn't, and it's basically the repercussions from that, him trying to fix his mistake. So it's really high stakes, which I really love. It's just a really fun fantasy story. I really enjoyed it. It felt like, and I've said this in all my wrap-ups where I've mentioned these books, I could picture everything so well. Like I think V. Schwab is an excellent author. I think she can paint a picture just so well with words. Even though some things like the magic system and like the travelling and the different POVs, it could be confusing, but I didn't find it confusing. I feel like she wrote it so well. I could see all the action parts playing out perfectly in my head. So the other main character you have is Lila Bard. She's from Grey London, and she's actually this kind of artful dodger character. She's a bit of a pickpocket. She really wants to be a pirate. She ends up robbing Kel and then ends up like helping him, and their stories are kind of intertwined throughout the whole trilogy. So it's really fun having those 2 main characters to follow. It was just such fun escapism, just really well done. I loved the characters, I loved the plot. So yeah, I loved all the relationship dynamics as well, like all the friendships or romantic relationships. They're all very well done and enjoyable. Going into Gathering of Shadows, I still really loved this. I didn't like it as much as A Darker Shade of Magic and A Conjuring of Light. I did find the first half of this a little bit slow. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it definitely was just picking up the pieces from the first book. I loved how Lila and Kel just kept like missing each other, how their plotlines kind of interwoven without them like actually interacting. It was really, really well done. What I liked about this as well, there was a tournament element to this, so like that was really, really fun. This book left on a huge cliffhanger, and then you've just got Conjuring of Light, which is just so high stakes. I loved this one. I think this was my favourite. I really just loved how it was done. It was really plot heavy without being too much, which was, again, I feel like so well done. This one is a 600-page huge book, but I didn't feel it long at all. It feels so quick to read, even though they're quite big. It reminded me a little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean. I know that's a really weird comparison. This story does involve pirates and action and fun, and so maybe that's where it comes from, but I just thoroughly enjoyed this trilogy. It is just fun fantasy. It's well written, it's fast-paced and enjoyable. I just highly recommend it to anyone. If you like character-driven stories or plot-driven stories, this has both. Like, so I think it would suit a lot of type of readers. But yeah, just V. Schwab does it again. She's fantastic. The next book is a book I was so surprised I enjoyed as much as I did. It was Nevermoor by Jessica Townsend. I was just like kind of shocked at this because it's a middle grade and I am not the target audience, but I enjoyed this so thoroughly. It's one of those books I could recommend to absolutely anyone. I actually recommended this to a friend of mine who's in her 40s, and she has 3 children ranging in like 7 to 9 years old, and herself and her children all loved this book. So this book is about Morgan, so that's the main character. She's cursed, so she's bad luck, she's a bad omen, and how that is written is so funny. Like, it's just, I couldn't get over how funny the first part of this book was, because she's a bad luck charm basically. So she's deemed a cursed child and she's actually destined to die on her 11th birthday, but actually on her 11th birthday she's whisked away kind of another realm. It's this like secret city called Nevermoor, and this man called Jupiter North takes her away. He says he'll be her sponsor for the Wondrous Society. So the Wondrous Society is this community of really exceptional people who are really talented at magic or in other things. It provides kind of protection. However, to get into it, she has to pass a series of trials. This whole book is set over the space of a year. Juniper tells Morgan that she has this kind of special power, but she doesn't know it, and he's not revealing it to her. So the whole book you're kind of wondering what is her special power or exceptional talent. So the whole book is her kind of going through these trials to see if she'll be accepted into the society. While she's living in Nevermoor, she's living in this like magical hotel. This book is just so whimsy and magical in the best way possible. Like, it's just not trying too hard. It just is really, really well done. Everyone kind of compares this to the new Harry Potter, and I really do see the similarities. I do think the author is planning, I think she's planning like 9 books or something. 3 are out already, so you have Wondrous Mist, is it Hollowpox? And then you've got Silverborn coming out soon. But this book is just so exciting and so funny and so high stakes and well done. I couldn't get over how much I enjoyed it. I ate this book up, and I think absolutely anyone would enjoy this. Like, if you're young or old, absolutely any age group could read this and enjoy it. I picked it up because of the Harry Potter comparisons that I was getting, and I heard good things about it, and I knew it would be good, but I still didn't expect it to be as good as I found it. It's just fun seeing her friendships develop and then rivalries as well. Juniper North is really mysterious and you don't really know what he wants. He's this really super talented man himself, but he's never sponsored anyone to do these trials before, so everyone's like really wondering what's so special about Morgan. So yeah, and you're in the dark about it too. It just felt magical to read, and it felt just cozy and fun. It was such an easy 5 stars for me, and I can't wait to read the rest of them. So the next book I have is Babel by R.F. Kuang, and I actually read this immediately after Nevermoor, so I had 2 5 stars in a row. I got this really nice edition from Fairy Loot. It has the Babel Tower here. It has like the character art on the inside. I knew I would enjoy this because it's a dark academia novel, which I usually really like, but I am still shocked at how much I really enjoyed it. So the plot of this is you have this fictional Oxford. So you have this Tower of Babel, which is the translation department in Oxford University. I suppose it's a little bit of magical realism, just a reimagining of our own world with a little bit of magic thrown in. So translation in this world produces magic, through silver. Basically, they have these like silver bars that they make in this tower. One of these bars, for example, could have an English word on one side with, let's say, the Chinese translation on the other side. The more the words are lost in translation, the more powerful the bar can do. And like some of these bars can be really basic, like they might help gardens grow, they might make ships go faster or safer, they might make buildings stay together, things like that. It's not like this crazy magic, it's more like normal everyday type magic. However, you kind of learn through this book how fundamental it is for the whole British Empire, will I say. At its core, this book is just a big book about colonialism, especially talking about the British Empire. Kwong is using the kind of metaphor of the silver working as the power it has over colonized countries. That is one thing I'll say about this book. So it is like magical realism, literary fiction, a little bit of a fantasy, dark academia novel. It's a little bit of everything, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that whole combination of stuff. I said this in my original review as well, and actually all these books, I've obviously reviewed them at some point in the years. I'll link all those videos in the description. They would have been more fresh in my head, so I might have something different to say. I feel like the talks about colonialism were a little bit on the nose on this book. This book wasn't subtle, is all I'm trying to say. I think Kwong was making her point and she makes it well, and I think she did that on purpose. I don't think she did that to think her readers were dumb. You know, some literary fiction can be very subtle and certain people might just pick it up, and I don't think Kwong wanted to do that. I think she wanted her point to be made known and made very clear, which I don't think is a bad thing. However, I did find a few points in this book where I'm like, okay, she didn't need to go in so much detail. Like there's a description in this, and I mentioned this in my original review as well, where the students actually see Canton for the first time and they see the Chinese buildings next to the British buildings. The following sentence just describes how ugly it was, and I was like, you didn't need to say it was ugly. We can see when you describe the buildings side by side with each other that it doesn't fit. So it is a bit on the nose, and I know it wouldn't be for everyone, but again, I don't think Kwong was dumbing down anything in any way. I just think she wanted her point to be made. But it was cool. It was cool to read a book about this topic, and she uses her characters in the story to make this point known. The main character of this book is Robin Swift. So he's this half white, half Chinese boy who is taken to live in England when he's a child. What's interesting as well, you never actually learn his Chinese name, you just know his chosen English name, Robin. He's more or less like trained up, so he would be a student in Oxford to work for the translation department, so he can translate things from Mandarin and Cantonese to English. He also learns like Latin and Greek. So yeah, and when he goes to Oxford, he meets Rami as well. So he's had a very similar life. He's from India and was taken to live to England when he was a child and brought up to translate. He knows a myriad of languages as well. And then you also have Victoire and Letty. So Letty is actually the only white British one in the group, and she's just a whiz at languages. And then you have Victoire as well, and she's from France and obviously translating from French to English. But yeah, as a dark academia novel, this is just excellent. Like the first half of the book, you do really see the quaintness and the really aesthetic lifestyle that they all have studying in Oxford. Like they're going for tea and scones, they live in this idyllic place, they're studying what they want to study, they're enjoying it, they're enjoying each other's company and the friendship they have. They really are enjoying, would you say, the benefits of the colonization that the British Empire has done onto their countries. They are the beneficiaries of it. You have a point in this book where they all kind of come to terms with actually what they're doing and what it's doing to manual labour in the UK and what it's doing to other countries and the detriments it's doing. So the silver working, they really come to a point where they're like, they can't really live in their bubble anymore, and they have to really decide, are they for or against silver working? And I really loved that. You have some of the characters really battle out the pros and cons on both sides. Do they just enjoy the life that they're benefiting from, or do they stand for what's right? And it's just really beautifully done. This book was heartbreaking. It's definitely more of a plot book than a character book, and Kwong definitely used the characters to further the plot rather than it being character based. I really enjoyed the characters, and I really enjoyed seeing their characters like develop and flesh out as the book goes on. I just love an excellent dark academia novel, excellent like literary fiction book. I just love the fact that it's a little bit of everything, and this is probably why the book has done so well, because I think a lot of different readers could enjoy this. Like if you like fantasy, if you like lit fic, if you like dark academia aesthetic books, the stakes in this book just get higher and higher and higher, and the emotions just get higher and higher. It's my first R.F. Kuang book actually. I do have the Poppy War and Yellow Face I really want to get to them now. I know she's a great author. So, and what I love, I think Kwong went to Oxford herself, so I feel like it's a little bit of a critique / love letter to Oxford as well. So just really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I feel like a lot of readers will enjoy it too. So the next book I have, I actually don't have a physical copy of. This was a listen on Audible, and I am so late to the party. So this is Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mum Died. I think this came out in 2022, I believe, but I only listened to it in 2023. I'm so glad I did. This was so well done. I would highly recommend listening to this because Jeanette McCurdy narrates it herself. So I think hearing things from her own voice, I think, is important. It definitely like added to the experience, I'd say, rather than physically reading it. There is actually a chapter where she audibly like tears up. So just everything she's saying, it just really did make the whole experience more real. So I do highly recommend that. So I'm Glad My Mum Died is Jeanette McCurdy's life story up to now. That's quite crazy to say because I think she's only 31 or 32. She's not very old, but she was basically the character Sam Puckett on iCarly on Nickelodeon. She's quite a well-known like child actor. She's kind of left acting now. So this is basically her experience in Hollywood on Nickelodeon as a child star. It's also a story about herself and an eating disorder she develops and her relationships, most notably the relationship she has with her mother. So this is hard to listen to. She's had a very tough life, and that's something I kind of found as I was listening to this book, was every time something bad happened to her, I was like, oh, I can't get worse than this. I can't get worse than this. And like, it actually just does. It just like keeps going. So she basically had just a very abusive and narcissistic mother who really pushed her into child stardom, kind of living vicariously through Jeanette. You do see how Jeanette did love her mother and wanted to make her happy, and didn't see the abuse happening until she reflected on it as a 20-year-old. So it is very tough to listen to, and I think it's a very important book to listen to. For me, it's quite interesting because I think when you see those child stars, you know, like anyone from Nickelodeon or maybe Disney Channel who really made it when they were young and they're very young and successful, like on the outside you're like, oh, they must have a great life, you know, I'm sure it's hard work, but I'm sure they love what they do, and it's so cool that they're so popular and successful so young. But it just really lifts the curtain on that. She's had like a really tough time. Her mother basically taught her to have an eating disorder, and she also talks about OCD tendencies that she has. She kind of talks about how used she felt on Nickelodeon as a child star as well. It talks about her romantic relationships too. I think anyone who has like a warped or a poor relationship with their parents, or I feel like any child star should listen to this. I feel like maybe with disordered eating would maybe find this helpful, just to feel like maybe they're not alone, that someone like on a pedestal like this has gone through it too. So I feel like maybe on an empathy point of view, this would be an important book to listen to. So it's tough material, but I just felt like it was just well done and really opened the curtain on child stardom. Like really did. What I really liked about this book as well is that it is just well written. Jeanette knew how to say something in very few words. She could tell one story, like one simple story, and it would just describe her relationship with, let's say, her grandmother so well. She can say stuff in this book in 50 words that other authors would do in 150. I feel like she got the essence of everything she wanted to say down so perfectly. She has this like dark humor to her, and it's really shows in this book as well, which I think is really important. I feel like she needed humor, and she is a humorous person. She is a humorous actor. It helped this book and it helped her, I can imagine. So the dark humor in this is just very well done. You can tell by the title that this is a dark humor book. I just like commend her. I think she's incredible. I think this book will help a lot of people, and I'm really glad I listened to it. She definitely is a commendable person in my eyes, and thoroughly enjoyed listening to it. I couldn't wait to listen to it. I couldn't wait, like when I put it down, to start listening to it again. I will say, and I mentioned this in my original review too, it does paint a picture on society of how we love dramatic stories. Like if she had kind of a standard childhood stardom story, this book wouldn't have done half as well. Like, I know some people have critiqued this book about it being maybe verging on torture porn, but I don't think that was Jeanette's intention. This just happened to her, and it just happens to be very interesting and just happens to be crazy. And I think she's very commendable for telling the story and telling it really well. I just thought about it, I was like, it does say something about society that we enjoy stories like this, and I don't know if anyone agrees with me. I think that maybe possibly negative spin on it wasn't Jeanette's intention, and I think she just wanted her story to be out there. Really, really glad she did. Thoroughly recommend this. Just, I would say, maybe be in a good headspace, I'd say, to listen to this. I think if you're feeling maybe down yourself, or maybe you're struggling with an ED yourself, or just be careful going into it. There is trigger warnings to it. It's not a light read, so just be careful going into it, but I do thoroughly recommend it to anyone. The next book I have to talk about, my top spot is actually my last book that I'm going to talk about, but this is a very close second, so that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I read this as part of my Dark Academia September, and as I said in the video, this isn't a Dark Academia book. I know people say it is, but I really don't think it is. However, it's so much more than that, and it's so good. My love for this is just heightened slightly because I'm currently reading The Dream Thieves, which is book 2, and I'm enjoying that just as much, if not even more, than this one. So I'm just fawning over this series. I love it so much. This is not new. This came out easily 10 years ago. I think it was 2013, 2012. It's one of those cult YA popular series. I just missed it. I don't know, I just didn't pick it up. In a weird way, I'm kind of glad I did, because when this came out, I would have been in college, I think. I think maybe when you're maybe 19, 20 and you're reading about characters who are 16, 17, 18, you might feel I'm more mature than them or something. Where when you're in your 30s like me, I think you can read this and be like, oh yeah, I remember what it's like to be 16. Yeah, I remember. I'm kind of glad I found this out now. That being said, I think if I read this as a teenager, I think if I read this as a 15-year-old or something, this would have rewired my brain. This would have been my favourite book series of all time or something. It's up there. It's still up there for me. That being said, I do know not everyone would love this. I just think I'm the type of reader this book is trying to target. Stiefvater has this humour that I love, and I know not everyone would love it, and I can tell the writing style wouldn't be for everyone. I can tell the story and plot wouldn't be for everyone, but I'm eating it up. I love it so much. So this is about 4 boys in a group of friends. So they all go to this academy called Aglenby. I think it's Aglenby, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Actually, going into this, I thought it would be a group of friends, but it's mostly, you have Gansey, who is the main guy, and all the boys are kind of friends with him in this first book anyway, rather than them all being friends with each other. You also have a character called Blue as well, and she kind of falls into their friendship group. Gansey believes in ley lines and mythologies, and he has been researching this his whole life, and you kind of find out why in this book as well. But he believes this myth about this Welsh king who has been buried on a ley line, and apparently if you wake him up, he'll kind of grant you a wish. So this book is about exploring myths. So there's a lot of this book where the characters are all exploring forests. It's very atmospheric and beautiful. What I love about these books is the plot is just nothing I've experienced before or anything I've read before. It's very unique, and I can't see where the plot's going to go. There is a few things, it's a YA series, so there's a few things you're kind of yeah, I kind of guess what's going to happen there, but I still don't really know. So Gansey himself is from a really well-off family, and he kind of has the means to dedicate his life to studying this. Even though he's in school, he really wants to find this Welsh king called Glendower. Blue is from this community of psychics. Actually, she's the daughter of a psychic. She lives in this home where all these psychics live together, but she doesn't actually have any powers herself. She's a kind of an amplifier. She kind of makes other people's powers really strong. So she actually predicts one of the boys' deaths. She's also been told her whole life that when she kisses her true love, he'll die. That seems to be the blurb that is always on the back of these books, but that is such a little subplot of the books that it's kind of crazy that that is the plot line that they go for. It's if she kisses someone, that person will die. It is definitely a major plot for Blue, but it's definitely not the main focus of the books. I think definitely the finding the Welsh king is definitely the main plot. You also have Adam as well, so he's this really poor student who's from a trailer park, and he actually just worked his way into Aglenby through a scholarship. He's really anti getting help. He really doesn't want to be owned or owe anyone anything, and this really causes a lot of tension between him and Gansey. That is explored way more in book 2, and it's done really, really well. I think Gansey has this, like, especially in book 1, he accidentally comes across as pretentious, where really he just wants to help his friends. Definitely says things he shouldn't say, but he's just kind of learning. But I love Adam's character. I think he's such a strong character in this book. And you have Ronan as well. You don't actually get his perspective till book 2. There's a major reason for that as well, so all will be explained in book 2. But he's a little bit of a poster PTSD child. He found his dad dead, and he's kind of been acting out since. So he's been kind of racing his car and drinking and not working at school. You care about him a lot, and the book kind of ends on a bit of a cliffhanger in relation to Ronan, and in book 2 it kind of explores that a little bit more. So he's a very interesting character. And then you have Noah as well, and he's the funniest. I can't say anything about him because it will be a spoiler, but he's just, you think he's unassuming and you think he's not that important, but he's actually so important to the plot, especially of book 1. That all the characters are great. What I love about especially the 4 boys is that they're very, very just fleshed out. They're really well done. They're very flawed. Their flaws are very obvious in the book, but so are their good points. And I think that's why I really like it. I don't know, they're not obviously good or delinquents. There's really good talks about wealth in this book, and like what it means to come from money and not come from money, and how you talk about it around people. Just this atmosphere of this book is beautiful. So it's set in this fictional town of Virginia in America. You have the characters like exploring this forest called Cabe's Water, where things happen that they can't explain, and there's a slight magic system in this that's Latin based. It's beautiful. Just this book is beautiful. A really random tidbit about these books is if you like cars, they're in their cars a lot. Gansey has his Camaro, I think what it's called, and then Ronan has BMW. They live in their cars and they talk about their cars and they're in their cars all the time, especially in book 2. This was 5 stars. Book 2 is easily a 5 stars. I just love this series. I love the messy relationship dynamics in this, like friendship and romantic. Definitely more of a character driven story than a plot driven story, so just bear that in mind as well. But I love Stiavatter's writing. I really love her writing. I love how heavy this book is while still being so light and humorous. Like the amount of times I've like laughed out loud reading these 2 books has been crazy. And even though there's a lot of dark themes and tones to this book too, so it's a lovely balance. That balance is done really, really well. I love how she describes things and how kind of humorously she sets things up. It's just very, very good. Beautiful books, just beautiful. So another book I read by V. Schwab this year was Vicious. So this is a superhero book turned on its head. And what I loved about this is it's just so simply well done. Like it's not this like crazy out there book. It's just a very simple, good book, if that makes sense. So this book has a time jump element to it. You have Victor and Eli. So in college and university, they are friends slash academic rivals. They are friends, but they really want to compete with each other. So in this world, you have extraordinaries or EOs. So they are basically superheroes, people with powers. But in this world, it's a conspiracy. So some people believe they exist, some people don't. So it is a bit of a touchy subject in this world. And Eli decides to do his university thesis on if the certain conditions would create an EO. So already it's a bit of a taboo topic. And Victor does his on adrenaline, so they actually end up kind of teaming up and doing experiments on each other to see if this is true. And then you've got 10 years later and they're trying to kill each other. So they're total enemies, they're out to get each other, and you kind of spend the book finding out what happened. And the pacing of this book is perfect. The characters are very well done and fun. I've seen critiques on the characters in this book being described as one-dimensional, but I think that's kind of the point. I think EOs in general, there is discussions in this book about have EOs actually lost their humanity and all they are is their power. So I think that one-dimensionalness is actually a point Schwab is trying to make and a point to the story. But what I love about this is that it's a superhero villain story kind of turned on its head. You start the book with knowing like, oh, he's the superhero, he's the villain, and then it changes. and then it changes again. I just love how slowly this story like unfolds, and just who you think is a good character or bad character just chops and changes all the time, and it's just excellent. What's fun about this too is that all the kind of side characters as well, like if they are an EO or not, are all quite interesting because you kind of spend the time trying to figure out what their power is. I actually love the design of these books because like these crossed out words is actually a plot point in the book too. But this book was just like simply fun, like the equivalent of watching a really good dark action movie. It reminded me a little bit of Robert Pattinson's Batman, or maybe any of the Christian Bale Batmans as well, like that kind of superhero villain story, but give it a dark tone. So not like Marvel movies, definitely more the Batman movies, if you catch my drift. I don't actually have too much to say about this book because it was just enjoyable from start to finish. It was just a thrill. It's definitely one of those books you can read in one sitting. Like, you have people breaking out of prison, you have people who can control other people's wills, you have just like brilliant action scenes. It's really just great storytelling. This is book one. There is Vengeful as well, I have it here, and I think Victorious is coming out as well. I was a little bit shocked that this is a series, but I actually think each book is different characters, because I did feel like Victor and Eli's story kind of was encapsulated in this book. Going in though, I thought it would be Victor and Eli for all three books. So I was kind of shocked at how fast paced this book was, because I was like, oh wait, they're going to resolve everything in this book. I can see where Schwab wanted to encapsulate a story in one book versus where she could have been slower with stuff and made it into a series with just one set of characters. So I will read Vengeful and see what I think as well, because I think the characters in this story will be side characters. Schwab's just plotting and writing is just excellent. She's definitely an instant buy author for me. I've enjoyed everything that I've read from her so far. If you want like a fun action book, just go for this. The next book I have to talk about is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, who obviously wrote the Hunger Games books. This is the prequel, and no one is as shocked as me that this was my favourite book of the whole year. I adored reading this book. I loved it from start to finish. So I don't think I need to explain the Hunger Games. I hope I don't. But this is a prequel story. So this is about, his name is very hard to say, Crowlin Snow. He's obviously the villain of the Hunger Games series. He's quite an old man in the Hunger Games. I think he's in his 80s. But yeah, this is set during the 10th Hunger Games, and Snow is just on the cusp of adulthood. He's just 17, 18. How this book kind of starts is as a bit of a final year project. The students at this school have to be mentors to the Hunger Games tributes. And this is kind of the introduction of mentorship in the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games obviously at this stage is still in its primal stages, and I think it was so interesting to see it because this is the 10th Hunger Games. It wasn't the spectacle that it was in the original trilogy. People didn't watch it as much. It was still very basic. It was kind of like kids in a smaller arena with some weapons. So this is the introduction of the mentorship program where people could sponsor tributes. So it was really cool to see that done. And then the war that kind of tore the capital and the districts apart is still very fresh in everyone's head in this story, and people are recovering from the war still very much. Snow and his family, he lives with his grandmother and his cousin Tigress. They have basically lost all their wealth. They still live in the grand apartment that they lived in, but they're basically kind of pretending to the world that they're still wealthy. Snow himself is kind of pretending he doesn't need this mentorship thing to work out, because the prize for this is actually a free pass into university, which he really needs. He's kind of working really hard to get the grades so he can go to university, get a good job, and get his wealth back for him and his family. The main critique I have heard from this book is that people thought that this book would be maybe sympathizing with Snow and changing your mind about him. I can assure you that that's not the case. Yes, like Snow isn't a villain yet. However, this story from start to finish kind of shows you the descent into how he could become a villain. From page 1, you can see how narcissistic, how selfish, and how controlling and power hungry and paranoid he is. Suzanne Collins is not painting him to be a good character. It does show you into his head, so you kind of understand where he's coming from, yes, but it's not in a sympathizing way. And I think people were kind of worried about that, and I was a little bit like that too. Like, this came out a long time ago. I picked it up because of the film adaptation that came out in November, and I was like, I loved the original Hunger Games, I loved the movies, and with the new movie coming out, I was like, oh, I better read the book first. And I just did not expect to love it as much as I did. This book is divided into 3 parts. So you have pre-Hunger Games, during the Hunger Games, and post-Hunger Games. Snow is basically the mentor to the District 12 girl, Lucy Gray-Bard. So it kind of shows you how disappointed he is, but actually he learns possibly how he could win with her and tries his hardest to win. It was crazy to see things from his perspective, and I think for me personally, I think you can tell from the books that I've just mentioned, especially Vicious, I love a story from like a morally grey character or the villain character. I adore characters like that, and I adore stories from these characters, and it was just crazy seeing Snow's thought process. So a good example, I feel like, in this book is he has this friend, I'm going to say friend, because he does portray that he is his friend, called Sejanus. He is actually originally from District 2, but his family did so well that they actually moved to the capital. He meets Sejanus's mother. In his head, he's like saying, oh, she's like district trash, she's gross. To her face, he's really genteel and really lovely. So I think that paints a good picture. And actually, something that I would say about the movie is obviously you don't get his thought process, where in the books you do. The movie was excellent though. It was so good. It was basically the book to screen. They didn't change a thing. I think they just like left out some things and made some things quicker. But I loved this. I loved Lucy Gray-Bard as well as the tribute and other main character of the story. What I really like is that she's not a Katniss Everdeen. She's very, very different to her. She's this performer. So she's actually a musician. Snow uses that to play to both of their strengths. Music is a huge element to this book. So that again translated really well to film, because you could actually hear the songs. The soundtrack is excellent too. I've just loved the whole experience of reading this. Now, it's not a perfect book by any means. I actually do think it has some pacing issues. I feel like sometimes, and I felt this with the original Hunger Games trilogy as well, like I feel like when a character is, for Snow for example, when he's like traveling to school, then in school, then he's at the arena, then he's watching the Hunger Games, the pacing of it can be quite jarring and quick. It's a minor flaw. It was still a 5-star reading experience for me. I think I just enjoyed it. It was just so much fun. I think reading this and then like watching the movie with a bunch of my friends and then like listening to the soundtrack, I just loved the whole experience, and I just think it was just the highlight of my reading this year was this book, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was just really unique and different. The plot was really unexpected. Learning why the Hunger Games came about and seeing it in its primal stage was so interesting. Seeing how a character can become a villain was so interesting. Seeing all the like politics and war play out, how humanity is viewed, was so good. Like I think just so well done and good. And I think if you're on the fence about reading this book because it's about Snow, don't be, because I don't think Collins is trying to sympathize with Snow at all, as I mentioned before, though it was just so interesting to get his viewpoint, and I loved this. I really loved it. I will say, a little bit like the Raven Cycle, probably isn't for everyone, but I ate it up and I loved it. Definitely my top reading experience of the year. That was all the books. I talked for a long time, but I did want to talk about just my top books, and because they're my top books, I have a lot of points, reasons why. So if you made it to the end of this video, well done. But yeah, if you'd like to subscribe, I do anything book related on this channel, so book reviews like this one, TBRs, reading vlogs, all that stuff. I'll leave all the videos that I mentioned. I have obviously review videos of all these books, and I'll link them in the description. I'll also leave links to all the books I mentioned in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.